Hello crafty friends, I'm Lean from Studio Kato and I'm so happy to be back with another video and very grateful that you're joining me today. This is the longest video I've ever made, but I think it's worth it. I had a lot of fun making these cards. I am showing you 7 different Christmas cards today, 5 different designs, and I love all of them, but I love them especially because I only used non-Christmas stamp sets for these. These are all spring stamp sets from Hello Bluebird, and you can use them all year round, obviously, but I'm going to show you 2 formulas to turn these critter stamps into gorgeous winter cards. Now, along this video, I'm going to show you tons of tips and tricks along the way, mostly for 1-layer cards as well. And this is probably a good trick for stamping, using your stamping platform. I like to make circle cards, but using circle cards in a stamp platform can be a little tricky. Just tape them onto a square piece of cardstock or a rectangular piece of cardstock, a scrap piece, and you can easily line that up in your Misti each time. I always like to stamp my images twice, not just with one ink. I like to stamp them once before coloring and once after coloring. You can see that throughout this video as well. I stamp them first with an alcohol marker friendly ink, then I can color them in with my alcohol markers, but then afterwards I can also. So I am going to speed through the coloring in this video. It is already very, very long. If I had to sit here and talk through all of the coloring, we'd be here forever. I'm using my Uhu markers today onto Clairefontaine DCP 250 GSM cardstock. As I said, I used alcohol marker friendly ink for my first stamping. And once I'm done coloring, I can put this little card panel back into my Misti. And I am going to stamp it again with Versafine Onyx black ink. This is a very crisp black ink, so it always gives a beautiful, gorgeous impression, but I like to use it for adding embossing powder. I like to stamp in black. This is a very slow drying pigment ink, so I can add clear embossing powder to it, and that is going to give me a gorgeous, glossy outline. So I stamp it, I add the embossing powder. I am going to take this panel off of my little jig there, and then I can add the embossing powder, sprinkle it on, and heat emboss it with my heat embossing tool. Now I say 1-layer cards, but whenever I make a 1-layer card, especially with alcohol markers, I really like to make it not a 1-layer card. I like to work on a separate card panel, especially with alcohol markers, like I said, because the alcohol markers will bleed through the back of the cardstock, and I don't like that ghosting image onto the inside of my card. So I do take one separate card panel for my 1-layer cards, and I glue that on my card base. But usually I add so many layers to my cards, I think this counts. Now, I am not great at coloring backgrounds at all. They scare me. I like to do them with watercolors sometimes, but the easiest way to add a background, in my opinion, is doing some ink blending. So if you want to make that a 1-layer card, all you have to do is cut a mask image of your critters that you stamped. And then I also cut a couple of pieces of purple tape into snowy hills. And that is the formula. It's really, really simple, but just add snow and you're going to create a beautiful wintry scene. Now I am going to show you 3 different ways of making that wintry scene. This is a full card panel that I'm showing you. It happens to be circular, but the idea stays the same. I am just adding ink blending over the entire panel of the card. The critters are very much in the scene. I will make that even clearer in a second. But the cards are going to get a little bit more of an abstract feel throughout this video, especially for the add snow formula. So I think all you really need to make your critter stamps or your spring stamps into Christmas cards is just some acrylic paint and water. I do thin down the acrylic paint a little bit, so it splatters more easily. And as you can see, I left my masks on my critters while adding the splatter, but I do take them off right at the end to add a tiny bit more splatter. that is going to add them more into the scene. And this step I am doing is also going to make them appear more like a part of the scene. I thought they were looking kind of separate and a little bit off, so all I did was add a little bit of shading, a little bit of a drop shadow. I am not great at doing that, but these critters make it kind of easy. You can just add them under their belly, just a little bit of gray. I did add blue gray, so it gets a little bit more of that wintry snow feel. You don't want to go too dark. You can always add it in more dark later if you're not sure. But yeah, adding a drop shadow is a great way to make your critters really look like they are part of your background. Now I made a quick circle card base here that is really easy to do. I've done it tons of times before in videos. All you do is die cut 2 circles, and in one of them, this is going to be the back of your card panel, you add a score line to the top. You add glue all the way over the top of the score line, the part that is above the score line I mean, and that way you glue the other panel in place that makes your card base, and then I glued the scene panel right on top of that. So that's the first card, a really simple 1-layer scene. There's a bit of coloring, a bit of masking, but overall really quick to do. This one is even quicker. I am using the Forest Fawns stamp set, and that bunny is also from the Forest Friends stamp set, which I used for the first card. Again, I'm going to do some masking, but I am also going to do some masking during my stamping. And as I said, I do like to stamp each image twice to make sure I can emboss it. This makes it a little bit harder, but if you only have a couple of images, it's still very doable. I stamped the bunny at the bottom of my Misti, and I am stamping the deer at the top of my Misti. So the bunny is still in place while I'm stamping the deer. You can just see it peek through right at the bottom of the screen now. So I stamped that, I added the mask. You always want to stamp the image that is most in front first, then add your mask and stamp the image that is a little bit more towards the back second. Again, I used alcohol marker friendly ink now. This is Memento Tuxedo Black. It's a great black ink. You absolutely don't have to stamp your images twice. I just really love the look of embossing powder. So I think it's worth the little bit of an extra step. I think it takes me 1 minute extra for each card, and I think that's definitely worth the effort. I am coloring over the little spots on the deer's butt, but I am just going to add a little bit of white gel pen later and fix that. For little details like that, I always use a white gel pen. I don't bother coloring around the dots. You are going to create more of a mess that way than you are going to do good. So a white gel pen is your friend. After I'm done coloring, you can see I stamped the bunny. Now for masking, you do want to emboss that bunny first. I am going to heat set that now, and then I am going to put the mask in place again and stamp the deer. If you heat set, I'm going to wait to explain that actually. So I'm going to stamp the deer now. The mask on the bunny is in place, and that is sitting over top of the heat set embossing powder already. I am going to keep that mask in place, sprinkle the embossing powder on, and then heat set it again. Heat setting the deer is now going to reactivate the embossing powder on the bunny as well. It's not going to matter at all. Just keep the mask in place until you've finished your scene, because now I'm going to do some ink blending. So just keep the masks in place. And after you're done, heat set that bunny again, because being heat set underneath that mask, I don't know what happens exactly, but you are going to get a really weird finish on your embossing powder over the bunny. It's almost going to look as if there's no embossing powder left. Just heat set it again and it's going to be glossy again. Now for this card, I did the same thing. I masked off some snowy hills, but I also masked off a frame. And I made sure to put my critters a little bit outside of the frame. So they're not completely in the scene. They are very much looking in on the scene. There's also not going to be a drop shadow under my critters. There is going to be a little bit of snow on my critters because I just couldn't resist. I really love the white splatter. For winter cards, definitely think about the colors you put in your sky. A night sky is the simplest thing to do because that looks the same during summer and during winter. But if you recall the first card I made, I definitely used a more wintry sky palette. Just use Pinterest or Google Images and figure out what a winter sunset or sunrise looks like. Just Google those images and base your colors off of that. It's what I did, and it definitely helps you. So I took off the masks of my little critters, and I'm adding a tiny bit more splatter of the white paint there, but I did leave the frame in place, so there is no splatter along that frame. It creates a little bit more depth in your scene because the critters aren't exactly part of the scene. I always think adding little elements outside of your frame peeking in adds more movement to your card, and I really love it. For these set of cards, I am going to use the Next Door Gnomes. All of them are from Hello Bluebird, all of the stamps I'm using today. I really love their stamps, but I haven't gotten around to using them a lot, so I thought I should make some Christmas cards with these. Now, gnomes are very Christmassy, but again, the scene I'm going to make with this card can be made with any critter stamp set. So you don't need to have the gnomes for this. Just look through your stash and figure out which funny or cute critters you can use. I am coloring these again with my alcohol markers. I'm going to cut these out, so this is not going to be a one-layer card. And the snowy aspect on these is going to look a little bit more abstract, but it still gives a very wintry feel. Again, I did think about the colors I was using. These are very Christmassy colors, the reds and the greens. I'm even going to turn their jacket's plate with a white gel pen as well. Now I'm working on a craft card panel. This is slightly smaller than A2, it's die cut, so there is a fun little frame around that. And I masked off a bottom portion of my card, and I'm blending on some white pigment ink. I love the look of white pigment ink on craft. It looks like it glows. But it also creates a very interesting backdrop for your critters or your gnomes, because if you add a little bit of splatter or even a little bit of sparkle like I will do, it's going to look a little bit like snow, like a misty snowy sky. All you have to do to really make it Christmassy is just add a sentiment. So I am adding one sentiment from the gnome set. This is Hey Gnomey, and then underneath it is Cozy Christmas Wishes, which is from a small, I think it's called Itty Bitty Holiday Sentiments from My Favorite Things. They have great small itty bitty sentiment stamp sets, and I love them. They're a great investment. These cards are really easy to put together. All you do is add a little bit of cardboard. I just add some dimension behind the craft card panel to add that to your card. And then I also added some foam tape behind my gnomes. That's going to add a little bit of dimension, but not too much. Now, to create a little bit of a snow effect, I'm adding some champagne glitter drops from Pinkfresh Studio. White can also work. I didn't want to use stark white because the white pigment ink on craft is also not stark white because the craft color is showing through just a little bit. I really like this look. I think the glitter drops look a little bit like snowfall. You can definitely add more of a snowy effect if this is not doing it for you, but I really like this design. I think it looks very wintry because of the colors I used. The Christmas sentiments underneath definitely turn it into a Christmas card. And yeah, that is the second that is the second formula. Just add a Christmas sentiment. This absolutely works for floral stamp sets as well. You don't have to use critters for this. I again just wanted to use my Hello Bluebird stamp sets that I haven't gotten around to using yet. I am using the Fawn Friends or the Forest Fawns again, which I used earlier in this video. And again, I am stamping 2 images using that same Misti trick. The deer is still at the top of my Misti, and then I am stamping a little bird sitting on her butt to for the deer to look at. I think it's very cute this way. And I stamped it in alcohol mark friendly ink. I colored it with my Ohuhu markers. Again, I'm speeding through this. This took me a while to color. I always color quite slowly. Now for the second formula, I do think it's important that you add a little bit of more traditional color schemes. I didn't go fully traditional here. I actually made this card for the Hello Bluebird December challenge. It's a Christmas challenge. So I used the color palette they had available, and I think it looks very Christmassy. They used some yellow in there, which I thought was really fun, some very soft pink, and a deeper red, and a blue-green. I really like the colors. I think they look very Christmassy, but not too traditional. And I'm adding these colors to a piece of watercolor cardstock. I'm just adding some stripes of color. This is not a scene backdrop at all. I think it's just very fun, a fun touch of color. Not too much thought has to be put into this. Just add some colored stripes and you're golden. Now I always like to hold my watercolor cardstock down a little bit so it doesn't warp too much. Not that I'm adding too much water in this project, but a great trick to use is adding a strip of purple tape to the back of your cardstock. So the purple tape goes all along the back of my card panel and a little bit beyond the card panel, and that is what I taped down. So you can see it a little bit. The two pieces of purple tape at either end of that card panel are taping down a longer piece of purple tape. So it's a great way to adhere your card panel down. I'm adding another Christmas stamp set from that itty bitty holiday wishes or holiday sentiments stamp set from My Favorite Things. I'm adding that along the yellow stripe, and I figured out the placement by just placing my critter on there. I always fuss with the placement a long time. I just don't show it in video because it would just be a still frame of me looking at a card, and that's not very interesting to watch. But I'm again propping this up on some foam tape, and the panel is already adhered down onto a top folding note card. I'm adding a little bit of sparkle with some Pinkfresh Studio embellishments, but not too much. I'm only adding sparkle or embellishments around the critter. You can also do it around your sentiment. I wouldn't do it on the white space. Embellishments are meant to enhance or draw the eye to your focal point. They're not meant to take away from your white space. I really love how this card turned out. It's a little bit more abstract. There's not an entire scene to do. It's also very quick to make because of this. You can also use strips of cardstock instead of painting them. That would be fun too. There's all kinds of ways you can add a little bit of a more holiday color palette to your critters. For these next cards, I'm using the Garden Friends stamp set. Hello Bluebird has a lot of these images. I think they have 3 stamp sets with the same mouse and the same bird and the same frog. They're very cute, and they are a great addition to each other because you get more poses in the critters. And I think birds are an amazing image on your cards. They can go for all seasons. You just have to give them different colors. These I'm turning into little red robins, and I'm not sure if I did a fantastic job in coloring these, but I had fun. So I'm using some very muted browns. This is not a color combination I use a lot, but I think it works for the red robin look. And then I'm just giving them a red chest. And that's already going to look holiday-y because I think red robins are a very traditional image on a Christmas card. So that's already bonus points for your Christmas card image. But I am again going to add a Christmassy sentiment, and I'm going to turn my card bases or my card panels into traditional Christmas colors. I'm going to use green and red and gold, which you can't go wrong with those color combinations for Christmas. Once I'm done coloring these, I'm going to stamp them again, emboss them, and fussy cut them out. There are matching dies available for all of these stamp sets. I choose to invest in more stamps instead of getting quartering dies for each ones. So yeah. I wanted a gold matting layer, but I also don't want to waste all of my gold cardstock just to hide it behind another panel. So you can see I die cut a rectangle from that gold panel from the inside of it, so I can still have that to cut my letters out of. For example, this is a alphabet die set from Pinkfresh Studio, I think, and I die cut the J and the Y, and I am pretending that the bird is an O. If you have large alphabet die sets like this, it's a great way to add a critter in the middle of it to spell out a word. Usually people know what you want to say. I'm going to glue the letters in place, and then I am adding the bird on some foam tape. The letters are a little bit dimensional. They are 3 layers of thick white cardstock and 1 layer of gold cardstock. And for the red ones, I only cut the frame of the letters, or the shadow layer of the letters, out of gold glitter cardstock, and the letters I left white. It's basically the same card, just a different bird, so I'm not showing you how I made it. It's the same thing all over, but these are great to make a set of. They're just 2 images to color in. I think these were the easiest to make, and I love the traditional color scheme of these. I hope you like the cards I showed today, and I hope you get inspired to use your spring stamp sets for your Christmas cards to get a little bit more life out of them. I love stretching my supplies, and this is a really easy way to do it. I'm very happy I finally got around to playing with these Hello Bluebird stamp sets. I hope you enjoyed watching the process. If you did, make sure to leave your thoughts in the comments below. Let me know which one is your favorite and which stamp set you are going to try this technique with. I'd love to see you make some cards with these 2 very easy formulas. If you like these cards and if you like this video, make sure to leave a like below and subscribe as well if you want to see more of my videos in the future. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you next time.